just to start off, just to a little bit of an introduction, I want to start off on a positive note. We've been serving over 500 meals every week in a grab-and-go model. Our teachers are continuing to hone their skills around distance learning. Just my hat is off to our teachers so much for starting the school year in a whole different vein and then finishing out like we never could have predicted where we are here in May. So definitely kudos to our staff on that. We are also excited because we're going to be training our staff in areas like the flipped classroom. We feel that will translate to less parent frustration in the coming school year. We think that what we're hearing from parents, they're burned out. They're tired of feeling like they have to be the teacher so much. And I did post a video about that flipped classroom today. It's not my favorite. There's parts that aren't my favorite, but it's a great example of what flipped learning can look like. And so we're going to continue that discussion, and certainly with staff training in the future as well. So those are some things that we're excited about. I'm going to go ahead and admit a few more people here as they come in, because I'm finding that I can't look at my notes and admit people at the same time. So I apologize for the delay. Okay. Moving on to the, I wanted to kind of touch on the budget picture from the state, because I think it's definitely already having an impact, and I know it will continue to have an impact on our operations. So that's where I will start. And the budget watchers caution us as difficult as this coming fiscal year is looking for us financially, for schools across the state and for the state in general. Budget watchers are cautioning us that the next fiscal year may be even harder on education than this one that we're coming into starting on July 1st. So it sounds like we're going to be in for a couple of rocky years when it comes to funding from the state and also the federal government. Just to give you an overview of the state, and you may be asking, well, how come they're predicting that this 2 years from now, not this fiscal year coming in July, but the one after that is going to be potentially even worse? Well, if you think about it, think of all the strong economic indicators that were present at the beginning of this fiscal year. Unemployment was an all-time low. House sales tax, all of the big three areas that the state looks at for funding education were all just running very, very, very well. And so there is that's kind of to help to kind of offset this big kind of crash to zero, basically, that's happened here after the virus has struck. So that's why people are predicting that there's a potential, certainly, for 2 years out to be a little bit even rocky. So definitely sounds like we're in it for the long haul. Speaking of the state, then Governor Newsom released his May budget revision on May 14. It reflects a $54 billion $54 billion budget deficit across the board. And that basically results in a 10% cut to the local control funding formula. I use that with a little asterisk because I'm seeing organizations put out that number, 10% cut to our main source of funding. However, the governor is proposing kind of a little bit of a shell game where they give us a cost of living adjustment of 2.31%, I think it is. And then they cut us 10% from there. So you get a cost of living adjustment and then cut way below that, if that makes sense. And so ultimately, you're looking at about an 8% in real dollars cut to the local control funding formula. Basically, you're looking at a $19 billion decline in Prop 98 and other reductions in education spending. So $19 billion. There are people now advocating at the state level and the federal level for some relief. Remember, this is just Governor Newsom's May revise to his budget. The budget has not been adopted by the state yet. That'll happen on by June 15. And then the budget goes to the governor for his signature at that point. So, and he has, I think, 10 days to sign or veto, and he could line item veto as well. So basically, you look to have a totally approved budget by June 30 is usually how it goes. Meanwhile, our budgets in schools, we have to adopt our budgets long before the state finalizes their budget. So go figure on that one. But so all we can do is look at these forecasts. That's why the May revision is so helpful for us. So there are people advocating for some relief. There are still some things that could offset this huge cut cut that we're seeing to education. Many of our education partners are advocating for another $175 billion in federal relief. You may have known that as the HEROES Act. It's made it through the House in Washington, D.C. It faces some headwinds in the Senate for sure, and it's not a sure thing by any means. So, but they're advocating for another $175 billion. And also the creation of a $13 billion emergency relief fund to cover increased costs associated with serving students in this new era that we find ourselves, especially in the area of special students with individualized education programs. To make sure that those students with special needs are getting the help that they get. And they're also advocating for an expanded E-rate services increase of $2 billion. E-rate helps us fund anything electronic. And so when you hear about hotspots for schools, more devices, helping with internet connectivity, that's what that would help with as well. So between the federal government and the state government, there is still some hope that we may not be seeing cuts as deep as Governor Newsom portrayed in his May revise, but there are no guarantees by any means. So we're in circle the wagons mode for sure. I want to double check to see if I have anything else. I did talk about this is the May revision. I talked about the budget deadlines that are coming up. I talked about the HEROES Act. Let me talk a little bit, and I'll take questions here in just a second. Let me talk a little bit about, so what does this mean for Mount Shasta Union School District? What is this looking like for us? Well, for our district, this loss of fund translates to around $400,000 in loss of funding. And that we're hoping to get offset by these other areas. We know that the CARES Act that was passed by the federal government those several weeks ago, you heard about that one, that is offsetting about 200,000 of that. So you can see that is a direct example of the help that the federal government can give us districts and cut that $400,000 hit in half. So we're hoping the HEROES Act can come along and do something similar, at least come close to that. Another thing the state has done is they are our employer contributions to retirement funds, STRS and PERS for our employees. Those were set to go up by several percentage points. They have been rising pretty much every year as part of the government's effort to make those funds solvent over the course of decades. And the state has given us some relief. They're using some money to offset those costs. So even though we are paying still into those funds, it's looking like it's some of the increases we were expecting and had budgeted for, we won't have to see hit us, which is good. So you can see kind of how there's this hit, and we're looking for how is this going to kind of backfill for us. So that's fiscally how it's affected us in this mode that we're in. However, some things that we've already started to do is look at cuts across the board so that we can really steer the ship into the storm that's coming and not be broadsided. One of the things we've done, we had 3 teacher vacancies at the end of the school year. Here coming up, we will have 3 teacher vacancies. We've only filled 1 of those, and we're going to absorb the other 2 at this point. We've also had to put our math intervention program on hold. Nobody wanted to see that. It was very nice to see that come on board here a couple years ago and to see it grow. The math intervention team has done an amazing job, and we want to see that continue. So that's going to be a big priority to think about when we are able to start thinking about, okay, what can we bring back and how quickly? Let's see, we've also cut some TA time through attrition in some other ways, and also some office staff time as well. So we're definitely already starting to make some moves to put us in the best fiscal situation possible to kind of weather this storm. So I will pause at that for a few seconds. I'm going to go over to the chat window and see if anybody's typed their name in. I don't see anybody's name typed in yet. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to go ahead. It looks like Janelle, go ahead.
Trying to unmute myself, sorry.
You did it.
So I heard you say that you are not going to be filling those 2 positions that are open. I know as a mom of an upcoming 3rd grader, and we have 3 classes already in second grade, and I believe they're anywhere from 20 to 24 kids. What's that going to mean for class sizes if we are trying to take those 3 classes and putting them into?
Thank you for your question. And right now, to answer that question, we don't know exactly how we're going to be dealing with that vacancy. What I'd like to see, obviously, is three separate classes of third graders. And I would argue that that's still not off the table, depending on the behavior of the virus and what it looks like for enrollment and other things. So that is still our plan A, if we can at all make it happen, is 3 full-size third grade classes. One thing we've also floated, and this happens a lot in tough times, is what does a multi-age classroom look like between second and third graders? We would be reaching out to second and third grade families if that looked like it was going to be the issue, and kind of form a coalition of the willing to kind of help us through that. And so that would be one thing that we could look at. And there's also some support behind a model where you keep 2 larger third grade classes. And because we may be in kind of a blended learning scenario, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but nobody is predicting that we're going to come back at the beginning of this school year just like we were at the beginning of last school year, with everybody coming up, parents in the buildings, all the kids there all day, every day, with the social distancing. That's simply impossible. And so given that possibility of us to be able to take those class sizes and make them a little smaller, it could be possible that other teachers then come and support those 2 third grade teachers in a way where they take some small groups and work alongside the third graders, the third grade teachers, to help offset some of those numbers. So there's some really creative thinking around that challenge. And but again, it remains to be seen what that can look like. So, thanks for that question. Alyssa. Alyssa, if you hit Control D, you can unmute yourself pretty easily. Alyssa Bostic, can you hear me? You're still here? I'll give you a few more seconds.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm on my phone, so I don't have a control button.
Ah, gotcha.
Quick couple questions. Will you be able to offer any form of daycare? And also, have you given any thought to doing like a year-round track program to split up the classes?
Those are both good questions. We will not be offering daycare. We had to, even before the virus hit, we were on track to close that program. We'd already made moves. The board had made moves to close that program because it was starting to cost us, this year, it cost us $15,000 over and above what we were bringing in to cover that program. And that program was always meant to pay for itself. And so, part of that hit was with Boys and Girls Club coming online. We knew that the Boys and Girls Club would take a lot of our students, especially the older students. They are our partners, and we support the work that they're doing as well. But our numbers just couldn't sustain we could not sustain the program. So we will not be providing daycare. However, I have been in close contact with a Boys and Girls Club. I've let them know that there's definitely needs, even clear down to kindergarten. And we've also talked about making our site available for after school kind of opportunities along those lines as well. So those talks are still ongoing. We'll definitely keep people posted. And then as far as a year-round model, the board right now, the current board calendar is regular school year starting in August, ending in June for the following year. However, everything is on the table, at this point as we move forward. And so it would be great if you had different ideas or, pros and cons on different things. Feel free to email me, call me, attend a board meeting, and you can always make public comment on any items, even if they're not on the agenda. So you can speak directly to the board about your thoughts. But currently the calendar is to have the regular school year starting in August. But as I said, through June and July, there will be a lot of conversations around different options. And like I said, everything is on the table. I will segue. I was going to bring this up later, but I will segue to, if you want to be part of the parent group that is kind of this work group on opening up school amidst this whole pandemic. We have a group started. I've taken the parents from both site councils at MSE and Syston. All of those parents are now part of that group, and I'm officially inviting any other parents starting tonight that want to be a part of that. Please just send me an email, and I'll be happy to add you to that group. And I will type my email address in now. It's B Barnhart at, oh, there's only one R though, bbarnhart@msusd.org is my email address. So if you're at all interested in that, let me know. And we'll be doing meetings kind of like this with actual, once we have more information from the state on what next year needs to look like, we'll be convening those groups. And I will touch on next year and what it looks like here in a little bit. So Alyssa, thank you for your question. Janelle, a question.
What's the commitment time on the site council? How often do you guys meet? And it's all Google Meet, correct?
Correct. And to clarify, these are not site council meetings. This is a specific work group that I've taken the site council as parents, and obviously if they didn't want to, they could say no. But I've started with that group of parents, and it's going to be on an ad hoc basis. There aren't any, scheduled meetings. A lot of it is going to depend on when we get information from the state and also the behavior of the virus as well. If suddenly we find ourselves back in, whether the county health department says we're no longer in extended phase 2, moving to phase 3 soon, and we find ourselves back in phase 1, that's definitely going to affect those conversations that we have. The public health department has made it very clear that depending on the behavior of the virus, we are in extended phase 2, but we could find ourselves easily back in phase 1 if there were some spikes in the virus behavior. So yeah, those are meeting on an ad hoc basis. All right, transitioning to the kind of the idea, I teased it a little bit, but this idea of next year. And this will be kind of the last section of my comments for tonight, certainly, and then we'll open it up for more questions as well. But as I alluded, next year there are many unknowns. That is a given. Many unknowns. I would still argue there are still more questions than answers. There are state groups that continue to work on guidance. The state superintendent's office, Tony Thurman's office, has convened several working groups involving, parents, teachers, classified staff, a swath of stakeholders from across the state, people that are actually living education that can kind of speak to what this looks like for schools. I don't know how many of you saw the CDC guidelines that came out. They kind of issued those quietly. Those were welcome on one hand because the advice was very specific. On the other hand, it kind of feels like they were created by people who haven't been in a classroom since they graduated from whatever institution they graduated from, because it does talk about some things, especially at the elementary level, where we're kind of scratching our heads and wondering how that could work. So we are continuing to expect more information from the state, certainly to help guide our work. I've already begun discussions about next year with our intervention team, our math leadership team, our ELA, English Language Arts leadership team. Those discussions have begun and will continue. And like I said before, that parent advisory committee is formed, and you can email me. I typed my email there in the chat if you want to join that group. I said before, the behavior of the virus is going to determine what school looks like on a given day. The key word I'm using is nimble. We must be nimble in our plans in response to the virus and also to parent needs. If you didn't see it already, I put out a link to a 1-question parent survey about right now, where do you see your child in coming back to school? There's 3 different scenarios I put out, and also a box where you could type in some comments. If you have not taken that survey, please go to your school's website. It's right on that live feed. The link is right there. It's just a quick 1-question survey. When I looked at it later this afternoon, 76% of parents want their children at school as often as is safely possible. So about 3/4. 15%, interestingly, would like to continue distance learning, but with the ability to physically attend on a limited basis, kind of like that learning center model. So that's important information that we want to consider as we make our plans for next year as well. So we can kind of meet our parents' needs as well. And it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. Some parents need, all the time, they need it to have happen. Other families are coming from a different place. And so for us to be nimble and be able to go, okay, how can we meet the needs of our parents? And with the county public health department making an announcement about the behavior of the virus here in Siskiyou County suddenly could put us back in phase 1. We need to be able to pivot to more of a distance learning model for 2 to 4 weeks until the county can lift those orders. And so it feels like next year there's the possibility of us being in one model and then another model and then back to another model. And that's our goal, is to plan for those contingencies so we don't feel flat-footed. it will definitely be a challenge. And then under social distancing guidelines, I already mentioned this, all day, every day attendance at school year. It's simply impossible, not just for us, but really for most of the schools and nearly all the schools in the states. In our state, other districts, by the way, this is other districts. They're talking about having 50% of the students on a given day, or even 20% on campus at a time. All schools are definitely ramping up their training around blended learning, especially, again, because I said local health departments have that ability to close a school or close schools in a certain town, depending on the behavior of the virus. And we definitely need to be ready for that. Currently, sports are on hold. That is a question I've heard recently, is what does the sports schedule look like in the fall? It's currently on hold at this point. I know that at the high school level, there are talks about what the season could look like. So I wouldn't be surprised if high school sports organizations kind of took the lead on that, and then middle school sports kind of started talking about what that could look like as well. All that to say that ultimately, of course, safety is the number one option, but we definitely want to be ready. We will be ready with a plan, should there be the ability to at least have sports, maybe with limited spectators or something like that, much like you've heard for other sports as well. So that concludes my prepared comments, and certainly, as promised, that Q&A, that questions and answers piece is really what this is about tonight too. So Beth, I'll come back to you, and then Cassie has a question about teachers being tested. So let's start with Beth, your question, and then I'll answer the question about teachers and the testing.
So if we go to a potential part-time on campus, part-time distance learning, the families that have multiple children between the two schools, will there be some way to make sure that all of the that family can attend school on the same day? That
is definitely the goal. It doesn't make any sense for children, for 3 to be at school on the one, and then the parents are going, this doesn't help me. I can't go leave my house to go to work. All of that definitely does not help. And so that's going to be one of our guiding principles for sure, is to combine those families. And I haven't heard any negative feedback, but you can kind of see we've been thinking from this paradigm from the very beginning, because as soon as we started talking about handing out Chromebooks or materials exchange, one of the first questions we started asking ourselves is, how can we make it so that families don't have to constantly leave for different reasons? And I think we've had success at that rate to greater and lesser degrees. But that's definitely been kind of our mindset from the very beginning, and will definitely continue. If we're looking at a year-long kind of a multi-pronged plan, we need to be planning for those families to go, okay, today's our children's day at school, whatever the school or grade level may be. Boom, we can take it to the bank and do other things that adults need to do to keep things rolling. Cassie's question about teachers being tested, that depends on the county and what the county can do. Right now, the latest I saw is that at COS, they were doing testing for their fire academy and police academy folks, and so some of those first responder type people. So I haven't heard anything more widely than that in Siskiyou County. I have heard in Shasta County, whole bunch of testing options as far as, what that looks like. Now, when it comes to requiring employees to be tested, that's a whole other scenario that involves working with our partners in labor to make sure that we're all on the same page there, that everything's legal. And so that there's all kinds of questions just in the realm of employer-employee relations all across the state, that those kinds of questions come up. But certainly we've always said from the very beginning, and we agree with the public health department, that testing is vital. And the more testing we can do, the better. Even if Mr. Barnhart comes down, I'm coughing, I should be able to go get tests and go, do I need to stay home for 14 days? Or is this allergies or a cold? And then I get tested. No, it's not COVID. Great. I don't have to be away from the office for 14 days. Truly, that would be what we would be looking at for adults. The ability to at least have that as an option, I think, would be important. But of course, the testing is out of our hands, but that will be part of the discussion. You've heard I think the CDC guidelines talk about, checking everyone's temperature before school and stuff like that. There are some questions about that legally. As far as checking children's temperature, they look healthy, and you're going to do a temperature check on a child who looks healthy. Where is that in the legal realm? So there are teams at the state level looking at that as well. and we should have some good guidance on that. So I hope that answers the testing question. It looks like Elise with a question: did something happen in the county today to make you believe that we might quickly go back to phase one? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I'm glad you asked that question. However, they've made it very clear to us when superintendents were meeting with the county public health department. This is about a week and a half ago. We did a Zoom meeting with the public health department, and they made it very clear that you could go from phase 3 to phase 1 in a matter of X number of COVID cases in the county, kind of a thing, or in a city. And I think I actually today, when the state superintendent had a webinar going on, one of his public health officers at the state level mentioned that the state is looking to potentially, when it comes to is it safe to open school in your area, they're going to be really leaning on the counties to say, yes, in our county, it's safe for us to move to X, Y, or Z or phase, whatever. So there's still conversations even at the state level about that. But thank you, Elise, for that question. Definitely nothing that would cause us to look at phase 1. As far as we know, we're, like I said, extended phase 2, moving to phase 3. And fingers crossed, definitely. Let's see. And another question from Melissa: is the possibility of an earlier back to school date still an option? At this point, that answer is no. None of the schools in the county, in Siskiyou County, are looking at that. And I would say for 2 reasons. The first reason is just the logistical piece. There's going to be, I read an article that really says that opening schools up again is going to be one of the most significant challenges facing education during our lifetimes. And so it's a heavy lift. It's going to be a lot of communication and talking. And like I said, we're still waiting on guidance from the state on what that looks like. The governor has not mentioned an early start anymore. And even those districts that have run summer schools in the past, they're now talking about pushing back their start date even for summer school. So you currently no plans for an earlier start date. The second, I said there were 2 reasons. The second reason, and this is more anecdotal, is just that you get the sense from some people, not from all people, but you get the sense that we've all been working so hard. Parents have been doing amazing things with their children at home, and people need a break, too. So so thinking about our families in that realm as well, we know that it's been a struggle for many of you to continue this distance learning at home. And that's what we're trying to alleviate by considering some other ways we can do distance learning that makes parents feel less like, the teacher potentially all the time. Let's see. Those are the 2 reasons as far as the early school start. Another question here, and again, feel free to type your name or just type the question in the chat box here. Right now at Mercy, Mount Shasta, they're testing every surgery patient and basically every patient that comes into outpatient surgery. 0 positives so far. So thank you, Tanya, for that. RN, appreciate that. And thank you for what you're doing for our community there on the front lines. Melissa has a question. Does the county give city level data to schools? A case or 2 in Wairika seems like it should have a different impact than cases in Mount Shasta or on our Mount Shasta schools. You are correct. It's very possible that the county, especially with Siskiyou County, we cover so many square miles. If there was something up in Doris, Siskiyou County, and for that to affect Etna would be kind of a hard sell. And so I really think that the county is going to be looking at more of a South County, North County, or a city by city scenario if there are certain spikes. And if they can be traced to, that locally and to show that they're that, not that widespread. Let's see. Another question here. Do you know when and if the Boys and Girls Club are going to open and what that looks like as far as social distancing? I'm glad you asked that question. I was actually on the phone with the Boys and Girls Club director this week, and he said that they are looking to open potentially, and I'll pull up my calendar here because I know you can still see me. Looking at the June calendar, he said either June 22 possibly, or more likely June 29. I don't know if they've published those dates for sure, so take them with a grain of salt, but that's what I heard from the director is they'd love to start by the 22nd of June. More likely it'll be the 29th. They will be following social distancing guidelines, so you've got to be thinking chances are they may be talking about smaller groups, allowing Boys and Girls Club students to come, every other day or partway through the day, that kind of a thing. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Remember that they have their own board, they have their own organization. So we kind of partner as far as being on the school campus, but we don't. I don't direct the operations of Boys and Girls Club. So feel free to reach out to them. They've got a great website you can check out. And of course, if you want to just email us, we can direct you to them as well. So that's Boys and Girls Clubs. And thank you, Lori and Stenya. I appreciate that. The kids being lonely. And this allows me to take a minute to talk about one of the main paradigms our teachers are keeping at the forefront right now for when school starts is when you look at, we know that the students have been struggling with not being in school, and that academics certainly have taken a hit. There's no replacement for having a child in a classroom with a teacher for those times during the day. There's no way you can replace that. However, what we know is that right now, so even with that loss of learning, it's even going to be more important that we consider students' social, emotional needs even higher at the start than academic needs. And if you kind of understand me on this, they're going to be coming back to school. Their only view of school right now is they miss school. They want to go back to school like it was. And if suddenly all the teachers are wearing masks and they're needing to practice some social distancing, and can only go in certain parts of the campus. We're thinking about having lunch in the classrooms and not, of course, putting them shoulder to shoulder on benches in the cafeteria. So school's going to look different, and we need to give our students time to orient to that new normal, and just kind of try to help them work through those needs. And so we're going to be coming back to school with that mindset of that social emotional piece being so important, and really checking in with each other, and really capitalizing on the time where we have students together physically in a space, and just to kind of revel in that moment, if you will. And so that's kind of the paradigm that we're entering the planning for the new school year with. Certainly academics being an important piece of that, but I'm sure that you understand with this being our kids being thrown for such a loop, like we've never experienced, certainly in our lifetime. So that's going to be important for us to address. Let me see if okay, good. So looks like Elise's mom. Thank you, Tanya. Still frustrated that Elise can't have a graduation ceremony. If people can go to the farmer's market now wearing masks, can't we 8th grade graduation class outside 6 feet apart, everyone wearing masks? That's an excellent question. Obviously, any junior high and high school is wrestling with that question. One of the things that's been coming up that we've heard from other, certainly the high school, for instance, is the issue of you can set up a social distancing scenario, but with students, who's to say that then there's my friends, blah, 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 and then you have pictures and all this stuff. We can't control that behavior. And the worst thing that could happen is to take such a celebratory celebration and have it turn into 2 weeks down the road this horrific. Hey, we've heard the stories. Somebody shows up and now 180 people are on quarantine, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's been our choice at this point to continue to support Mr. Riccomini and assistant staff in their efforts to do a graduation, a virtual graduation. Like I said, I hear you, but we're still very, very concerned about, being able to concerned about student safety. That's our number one priority. And then it looks like an addendum to a message, and only parents, guardians present with their student. Yeah, I understand. Melissa, Fairchild Medical Center, Wairika, begin testing all EMT, police, medical staff, as well as essential workers on the 26th of June. So that goes back to that testing question, and very possibly testing being available, certainly for school staff, as available, as requested, that kind of a thing, I would imagine would be part of this. And then, one other thing to think about too is when I talked about being nimble, I talked about, okay, so the whole school would, be at school on, a certain schedule, off and on kind of a thing. And then if the virus spiked and then suddenly that might change the whole school, keep in mind there's individual impacts as well. We want to be nimble in the fact that there could be a student who was in touch with an uncle from out of state or out of town, and then suddenly uncle, and then through the tracing, that student and that student's family has to be on quarantine or something. And so for us to be nimble in one mode and be able to meet a family's need in the short term for a couple weeks or whatever, until they can rejoin their group at school, we want to be thinking about those scenarios as well. So meeting people's needs and so many different needs that present throughout next year is going to be our job number one for sure. Thank you so much for those questions. It looks like we have from Nancy. It looks like Nancy Swift says, we run the market, wearing masks, social distancing, hand washing are highly recommended. It's outside. Good point. They have to manage to have only about 50 people in the available space, 145 people per square foot at a time. Is all such a fluid moment with the pandemic. So appreciate that, Nancy. Definitely tough decisions around for sure. But if we're going to err, we're going to err on the side of caution at this point in the game for sure. Feel free to type your name or any other question. Feel free to make a comment. If you just want to make a comment, you can type your name and we can have space for that as well. As we're waiting, let me see if okay, good. A couple other ones have come in. FYI, Mercy Mount Shasta testing available for essential workers now if you want to be tested. And there's a phone number, the 6111 number. So thank you for that. And with regards to the grading system, at one point we were advised that based on the challenges of distant learning, kids would not be getting a worse grade than their third quarter grades. And then that was reversed, and there's some frustration there. Looks like 50 hours a week on homework to pull a C. I'd love to see more understanding around the grading given all the frustrations right now. Thank you for bringing that up. To kind of clarify a little bit on the question there, it says kids would not be getting. Remember when I specifically posted that on our website and through our live feed as a first reading. And on the live feed, if you look back to, I think it's 26 days or so ago, it says that, okay, the board, it's advised the board had their first reading. Here's what it's looking like. If I had it to do over again, I think I definitely bear some responsibility for not being clear in explaining what a first reading means. First reading is simply that this was our discussion. That was the discussion at that first board meeting. But in order to change board policy, it takes 2 board meetings. So then at second reading, we received public comment. And at that point, the board decided to take out the words hold harmless, but they decided to add in the phrase that teachers can take into account the effects of the virus. And so if you have any concerns along those lines with grading, please reach out to your child's teacher. Please reach out to your child's principal. It's simply a matter of communicating, making sure it's very clear that we are understanding what those effects of the virus are on your child. I can't make any promises as far as to a grade or anything like that, but that's what's built into the board policy. So there's definitely the ability for parents to make that case to the teacher and say, hey, I had a B, now we're at a C. Here's a little bit I'd like you to consider. And certainly our teachers, our teachers are not sitting there going, how can I grade the students down? I pride our district on having very caring staff, and certainly Kale's been doing a great job in working with parents as well. So please talk to your child's teacher, your child's principal, and we can work through those. Let's see. And it looks like Bonnie is looking like even if the children get to go to school part-time, will we be continuing the home distance learning? As I said before, we're looking at all schools across the state are looking at some kind of a blended model, because currently with social distancing, it's simply impossible to put 555 students onto the MSC and Sisson campuses all at once and maintain social distancing. It can't be done. So that's why we have to look at, okay, so how many kids can we bring on and for how long? Our goal is to get as many students onto campus for as long as possible if we can do it safely for those families that are interested in that. And certainly not to force families who aren't interested in the model to actually do that, and to be able to provide some kind of a way for families. Like I said in the survey, 15% of our families indicated an interest in maybe more of a learning center model where a lot of it's distance, but the child can come in, a certain time a week or something like that for just a little additional help. But definitely, Bonnie, to answer your question, it's definitely will not be all students at school every day. Thank you for the shout outs, you guys. I appreciate that. Question from Thule: are social emotional resources adequate currently given the need? Will the current counselors' hours be maintained? Is there room to consider increasing these resources if needed next year? That is where we're coming up against what the state is doing. The state is asking us to do more than we've ever done. And they're saying, by the way, you're going to need to do it on 8% less of your budget. And so currently, to answer the question about our counselors, one of our counselors was leaving us at the end of the school year anyway. 20% counselor was leaving. So we still have Melissa on deck for 80% of the time next year. So we will have Melissa working hard on that. But we know that the students' needs are going to be overwhelming, and it's going to be up to each of us. Our teachers know that they're going to be coming into that school year with a mindset of, how do I meet the emotional needs of these students? How can we help them through this piece, even though we may not be a quote unquote counselor? You see those memes, you see those t-shirts about everything teachers are. Counselor is one of those. So we may, our counselors may not have letters after their names in regard to counseling degrees or anything. But I'm very proud, even in the non-COVID times, of the stories that I hear from our teachers of how they have made students feel welcome, made them feel at home, made them feel connected. That is our job one as teachers, is to build that connection, that relationship with students. Let's see. Got that one. Nurse. And thank you so much for those. Thank you. And here's a question. Will families be able to request days? How will that decision be made? That's an excellent question that we're going to involve families and teachers with as we move forward. A great example is, for instance, and again, this is from other schools in the state, many unified districts that have high schools and junior highs, they're thinking of doing more of a distance learning model for those students and bringing their elementary school students more on campus if possible, because that's your foundational. How do you teach a child to read effectively, through a computer? We've been doing a lot of training on it, but there's no trade-off for having the teacher right there and listening and pointing. Is the kid tracking it with the words? Not saying that that's something we would, put in place for next year, but it is something that people are considering. And so when you look at, well, how is this going to look and how much time are certain kids going to have on campus, that's going to definitely come into play. There are also those students that in this short amount of distance learning that we've been reaching out to parents, and parents are busy, and parents have different levels of ability to handle all of this together. And we've been able to identify students who really struggle in a distance learning model, to the point where they may not even be working that 50 hours a week of homework. They may not even be able to be doing anything. And so you have to think about, well, then how do we support those students that we know are going to struggle a lot with those while others don't? But we want to be equitable too. I don't have those answers tonight, but we're going to involve parents in those discussions so that when we put out our plan, it has been, vetted with our community, eyes on it for sure. And conversations like this will continue throughout the summer. I would probably say at this point, the next one you can expect of a night like tonight would be sometime in June or early July, maybe after the 4th, when we do have a solid budget idea, so that I can come to this group and say, okay, here's what the state finally did with the budget. Did the federal government come through with the HEROES Act? How much does it mean for our school? Did it offset that $400,000 to a greater degree? Those are all questions we don't have answers to at this point, but I would like to keep our community informed about those scenarios as well. Let's see. Thank you. And then as far as, again, to answer the question, if we're looking to hire any help for the counselor, we would love to hire more counseling help. The question is, when we have 3 teaching positions and we've only filled one of them and we still have 2 left, that gives you a sense of how dire the budget is. And so then we're looking at, okay, so what would we have to cut in order to do that? The other piece that's a struggle too is we were very lucky to find Jordan a 20% counselor, somebody willing to work for 20% of a full-time equivalent as a counselor. Most counselors are going to need more full-time time. So we were lucky for that 20%. It's very hard to find at just a 20%. What the board members have advocated, and people at board meetings have said, man, it would be great to have 2 full-time counselors, 1 at each site. And I totally agree. But again, that comes down to a question of funding. And keep in mind, if you haven't followed the education funding budget kind of drama over the course of years, in 08, 09, with the Great Recession, our school funding went way down. And it took clear until about 2 or 3 years ago for our funding to come back up to 0809 levels. And all of our costs, of course, have continued to go up. Fuel costs, employer costs, all of these things, materials costs, electricity have gone up. So before COVID hit, we were being funding just a little bit above how we were funded in 0809. And now here we are taking a hit, an even deeper hit, as economists are saying this is way greater than the Great Recession of 0809 at this point. So make no mistake, money is certainly one of the biggest headwinds that we're facing in all of this. But we want to, with parent input, we want to make sure that we're using those dollars to benefit the most kids in the ways that make the most sense, for sure. Let's see, another bus route, caravan parade, please. And thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you so much to all of the staff members who put that on and participated. Kristen Rickamini, Linda Smith in particular, Amy as well worked hard on that. And we're very, very appreciative of that. That was really just a special moment for staff as well. Potentially looking like for incoming kindergartners, as social distancing can be hard with younger kids. That's exactly right. And when you think about kindergartners with masks and everything, I mean, we're still going to be looking at that. I would love to see them not have to wear masks. I would love to see them playing together. It may mean, I know it will mean hand washing will be vital. And it's also going to mean us being very careful with the toys that we have. We've already told our teachers, if there's any plush toys, stuffies, get rid of them. We're pulling the carpets from all the classrooms because you can't easily, scrub those, sanitize those. If you have a whole box of blocks, imagine being okay, sanitize all the area of the block, right? And have to do that okay. So we are thinking about those kinds of toys that we can potentially use where kids could play with. The question becomes, and this is again questions that high schools are dealing with, is PE and a ball. Do we let the children even throw a ball back and forth? Maybe we can do it if we make sure they wash their hands, they play for a little bit just in a small group, wash their hands again. We're going to get a lot of parent input on that. We don't want students coming back to this school that feels like, wow, we know it's going to be different, but we want kids to be kids as well. And that is going to be the student safety paired with letting kids be kids, and finding that balance is going to be a challenge for this summer for sure. Let's see. And all the effort. Thank you. And thank you, Fiona. It's good to see you. And I saw some other young faces. Thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate that as well. Any other questions or comments? Again, thank you for joining us. And before you leave, if you think of, it looks like we may be winding down, I just want to say from our staff's perspective, truly thank you so much for what you're doing as parents, families, caregivers to support your children in this. We know it has not been easy, and thank you for partnering with us on that. And please tell your children hi for us. And I can't tell you how proud I am of our teachers for the work that they've done. I love hearing the stories that they're telling me about the interactions that they're having with your children. And so thank you for sharing your children with us, and thank you for traveling with us through this uncharted territory. I had a teacher staff meeting yesterday, and I was like, I took for granted walking into a school and there's children there. I mean, who would have thought that our children couldn't even be at school? It just blows my mind on that. And so we want to get them back, and we want them to be safe, and we want families to be able to get back to work. And we want to partner with you in doing that. So thank you for being here tonight. Definitely appreciate you here, Hunter. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to join us tonight. Thank you. And like I said, I'll still hang on the line if there are other questions, if you want to stick around. Thank you about that comment from Mrs. Johnson. I agree. Yeah. Thank you, Colleen. Yeah, there's a lot of planning that goes into that. I can tell you. Definitely. So it's certainly a heavy lift. We're coming into a week where teachers are having to plan for that final packet, and they're being asked to now suddenly look at getting their rooms ready for the summer. There's definitely a lot on teachers' plate. Not to say that people potentially wouldn't step up, but it's definitely we're getting into a very interesting time as far as workload for sure. Thank you. Appreciate that comment. Thank you. Here's a question on parameters and discussed in order for students, parents, and staff to all be at the school, whether it's for drop-off or the instructional environment, for example, testing, vaccinations when available, masks for all. Those parameters are being discussed. Certainly, the public health department has a large role to play in that. The Centers for Disease Control and also public health officers at the state level. And so there are work groups happening across the state at this point that are attacking those very questions about the instructional environment, pick up and drop off, vaccinations when available, masks for all. I can pretty much guarantee that the staff members will be wearing masks to be able to protect students. Remember, when you wear a mask, the research that I've seen is it doesn't protect you, it protects other people from you in case you're sick and you don't know it yet. So that's our goal, is certainly to protect each other and our students from any illness that staff members may have. Ava and Odin, hi. Thank you for saying hi. Shout out to you guys for sure. And I hear you, Mom, on that. And Jess, parent parade past the school. Definitely. I mean, shoot me an email and we can discuss that for sure. Thank you, the Turk family, for that. And oh my goodness, so much work went into that video behind the scenes as well. Very proud of the staff members. Kristen Riccomini again took the lead on that. Such a touching video. I really enjoyed it myself as well. Thank you for that. And then here, and again, it's okay if you joined late. Is there a place where this recording is going to be posted? I have recorded it. My goal is to post it onto the website of each of our schools and our district website. So feel free to look for that here in the coming days. It'll be the first time I've tried to post a recording of a Google Meet. So bear with me on that, but my plan is to post that. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you, Kaden. Awesome. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it, Taryn. I see my son. Hi, Harley. I got a shout out to my boy, Chewbacca there. Hi. Thanks for being part of the meeting, bud. I'll see you in a few. And Kristen, thank you. Do another teacher staff parade for end of school year. Kristen, I can't thank you enough. I have no words. And thank you, Christopher. We say hi to you. We miss you as well. I'll make sure Mrs. Hainan knows. Hey, bud. Good to see you. Hello.
Miss school? Yeah. I miss school.
Me too. Can't wait to get you back, man. Keep reading. Keep reading.
What does reading do? Makes your brain smart.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So you press on the thing. You press on the thing.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mariah. We're going to go ahead and close it out officially here in about 4 more minutes. Just to let you know, if you have any further comments, feel free. But I'll go ahead and close it out here in about 4 more minutes. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. And like I said, we'll continue these chats. Make sure to email me if you have if you want to be part of that parent advisory group, that work group as well. And again, thank you for joining tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time to get the information. And spread the word, please, definitely, to your contacts, to your friends and neighbors whose students come to our schools. Definitely spread the word. And like I said, we'll post this on the internet. Thank you. Good night there. And thank you. Amber, got your question there. What is happening with sports currently? Sports are there's no plan to move forward with fall sports right now. However, I can say that I know that I'm sure CIF, that's the Interscholastic Federation there at the high school level, will be having meetings. And certainly if the high school is being able to compete in different modes, a lot of middle schools will probably follow that lead as well. So certainly we want to be able to have a plan to have those fall sports come online if possible, even if it means with fewer spectators, whatever that might look like. So, certainly we do want to have a plan to be able to pivot to moving on with sports. But currently that is not an option until we move to a further phase with the virus. Looks like a question here at the bottom. Are there any resources where both parents are working and having trouble getting any work done? I would say continue to reach out to your teacher, because yes, there are certainly resources available. One thing that I have heard from parents, I see this sometimes from my own children as well, no offense, Harley, is sometimes you'll see our children behave a certain way at home, and then suddenly they're on the phone with the teacher, and it's like, yes, here it is. Oh, look, I'm working. And you're like, really? How come you don't act that way at home? I mean, you see cartoons and stuff like that, and that does play out. So a lot of times, and really take it as a compliment. Those of you parents whose children may be struggling in getting some of that work done, just know that your child is comfortable, at home, and maybe along those terms. But please reach out to your teacher. There are definitely ideas that your teacher can have because they know your child too, and can help with some of those ideas. Let's see. And then Melissa, sports, no high school graduation. I can't speak to that. I don't think there's any spring sports certainly for this year. And I don't know what the high school's plan are for fall sports. I know, having been an athletic director in Modoc County, football comes online pretty early in the summer. And so, and I haven't heard what the high school's plans are those. Remember, the high school district is separate from our district. We're a K-8 district. So they have a whole separate school board and everything. I don't know what their plan looks like for that, for sports, but I can guarantee that, keep in mind, it's not individual schools. If one school says we're going to do sports and no other schools are on that page and they're like, we're not going to do sports, you have to have, it's part of a league. You've got to have at least, 2, 3, 4, whatever teams, saying, yes, we're going to have our league up and running. So that becomes definitely a league level conversation. And we know those are happening. And rest assured, I can tell you, Kale, as you know, Principal Riccomini is heavily involved in Little League as well, and has already started having some of those discussions with parents around sports in the community. And so we'll definitely be assured that we'll be bringing those sports online as soon as we safely can in accordance with the guidelines set out. Let's see. And is there going to be a way to coordinate with high school for schedules when that comes around? Alexis, if you're still on the call, maybe unmute yourself to clarify your question. When you say schedules, are you talking about sports schedules? Are you talking about when we're in school and when we're not? I can
Sorry,
speak.
Barry.
Go ahead.
Casey Lowry is Alexis's mom.
I'm sorry.
I was just curious because I have 2 great children. They are part of that. They're much better at school than they are at home and struggle to get anything done when a parent's not around. But with both of us working, I have a high schooler that's home, but I just didn't know if there was going to be a way, or if you even have looked at that.
I see. Like, of course, when, let's say your high schooler and your middle schooler can both be at school on a given day.
Yeah. Is there a way that we're going to be able to make some sort of, I guess, more of a suggestion that we can just maybe coordinate something like that when or if it comes around?
Casey, thank you for your question. The one thing that we are looking at potentially is Well, not potentially. We know we have to coordinate with them as far as transportation goes. We provide homeschool transportation for them for the buses. So there is a level of communication there. However, we have no control over what their learning, model might look like for the following year. And so it's just going to depend. But yeah, it's definitely where I'm glad you put that on the table so that that can be part of the conversation of, okay, so what if there is a middle schooler and a high schooler, how is that going to work? And maybe we can, at least be in contact. I think you make a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just more of like a survey type thing on days when we it is hard because you're not in the same district, but just maybe coordinate that when that comes around later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You bet. Right on. Thank you for that clarification on the sports. Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, none of these decisions are easy. I definitely know that, certainly from experience. We're living it now, and these decisions that people are being forced to make during this time are definitely not easy. But definitely in keeping the safety of our community at the forefront of our minds. If I was going to be, again, erring on the side of safety, I think is a great way to go. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again for joining us tonight. I appreciate your time. Take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for everything you're doing at home. We're almost there. I hope you enjoy this long weekend ahead. Man, I can't believe it's this close to June already. All right. Well, everybody take care. Thank you for joining tonight.
Hello.
Bye. Good night.